We believe, Mr. Chair, in America today, the cross-examination of the sexual history of a certain rape victim is number one, ineffective, and number two, overrides the right to privacy. We believe that the goal of government side is number one, we give a fair trial to where the person would be compromised of his rights and would be compromised of his privacy. So let me move on to the definition of this debate. Number one, how do we define the cross-examination? Cross-examination is number one, the questioning of a person. The questioning of a person. Basically, that involves number one, his basic personal information and all that. We say that number one, we believe that sexual history is defined as previous sexual intercourses with other partners or other people at the FD. So before I move on to my first argument, I'll be talking about the parameters that government would set in this debate. First, we'll talk about how we'll still cross-examine these people, but we'll be removing the sexual history part where they ask the sexual history part at the FD. So let us make that clear at the FD. So for the first argument, we'll talk about how banning this. We will ban this. We will ban cross-examination of a rape victim's sexual history because it downplaces the right to privacy. We say, when do we ban something in the first place? When number one, it's something that's directly harmful, and number two, there's a clear and present danger at the end of the day. Now, how is this happening in the proposal or in the current policy? We see that number one, it tramples the certain right to privacy of the certain rape victim or a certain individual, because we see when they interrogate the certain people, they actually ask how they had sex with other people and all those partners that they had in the previous or something like that. We see that number one, this is something private for the person to begin with, and number two, this is something that the state respects. Because let me give you an example. Number one, the privacy jurisprudence. Let's give this example where the Lawrence versus Texas case. Because the majority decision found that the conduct of this person was part of the liberty of the 14th Amendment, which states that the Texas state furthers no legitimate interest which can justify its intrusion into the personal and private lives of these people. We see that number one, please sit down, take your point later. We see that number one, the state, or in that certain scenario, we say that the state respects the right of this certain person to this privacy at the end of the day, and this value that the state upholds in the current status quo. We believe that the cross-examination of these people will lead to the trampling of this privacy. How does that happen? Because the fact of the matter is, when you interrogate a person of this sexual information or this sexual history, we say that number one, it already makes him tell certain private things that shouldn't be told to public at the FD. For example, I'll take your point later. I told you. For example, we say this kind of secret sex you had with your boyfriend or something like that would be asked in court. We say that is not connected to this certain rape case. Number two, it doesn't justify why we should catch this person at the end, which I'll be proving my second argument. Okay.
We say that we are willing to override the rights to privacy when we see that it's pertinent to the case that's being tried and it helps in the achievement of justice at the end of the day.
Well, that's big question. How does that happen at the end of the day? How does overriding the right to privacy is justified in your side? That's why that opposition has to justify. Is that number one? The overriding of this privacy would give a fair judgment of this certain case. So that's why that's a burden of opposition, and that's why I'm moving on. I'll be continuing my first argument. So we say the importance of this argument is that therefore privacy is something that the state upholds or protects. And we say that number one, if the policy hasn't enough justification on whether or not when it overrides this because therefore privacy is something the state upholds, and number two, this policy doesn't forward justice and harms this right. So we say we should scrap these kinds of things, and we say, I already took your point. So for the second argument, I'll be talking about how the policy doesn't help in the adjudication of these rape cases. Because in order for us to understand what's happening of a rape victim situation, we have to have a proper information about that person. And we say sexual history isn't proper information at the end of the day. Because number one, this is something kept private. It's an intimate act between two people where two people are consented with each other. So we say, how is it connected to rape at the end of the day? Which I'll be moving on to my comparative analysis. We say, what's the difference between sexual intercourse and rape at the end of the day? Sexual intercourse is a consented activity where two persons get to love each other in the bed or something like that. We say that number one, they're under these kinds of certain decisions. We say that number two, these people know what they're doing in the bed, and these certain people actually are having sex with each other. So we say, how does it differ to rape? We say that number one, rape is something that's not consented at the end of the day. It's something that's not consented at the end of the day. We say that number one, this is what opposition might say in our case. That number one, sexual intercourse will prove promiscuity or whatnot. We say that even though that certain person was promiscuous, it doesn't justify why she should be raped at the end of the day. It doesn't justify why she should be held through force and locked into the room and be tied up of her clothes or whatnot. We say that number one, rape is something not consented, as I've told you. We characterize to you that rape is something that these criminals really do at the end of the day. We say that, what does this prove at the end of the day? We say that it doesn't justify a right adjudication or right decision for the court because it only proves that the woman is just sexually active. It just proves that the woman just had sex with his boyfriend. It just proves that the woman had sexual intercourse. It doesn't prove why a certain woman needs to be fucked by something or without consent at the end of the day. So in the greater scheme of things, we say that number one, we have to give a fair justice. We have to give a fair judgment that is right and balanced at the end of the day. And we say that this policy doesn't achieve that. Thank you.
Here.